This year has had more Formula One races than ever before, but apparently that's not enough. The FIA has given the green light to 3 more sprint sessions in the F1 calendar in a bid to keep the sport exciting. But is the calendar becoming too busy for a season? Plus, how do F1 owners have a direct financial stake in the Las Vegas Grand Prix? Stay tuned for all of that and more coming right up. First up, Zach Brown says that Red Bull cheated. The FIA has been under a lot of pressure for a long time now, but the most recent controversy of Red Bull's overspending is one that doesn't seem to be going away. After the FIA confirmed rumors that Red Bull had committed a minor breach of 2021's budget restrictions, they were hoping that the issue would be quickly forgotten. But rival team principals are making sure that something is done for next year. Mercedes boss Toto Wolff threatened to intentionally overspend next year if the punishment for Red Bull isn't strong enough. Toto has since admitted that it isn't an easy job for the FIA to decide on punishment and that the situation was tricky because the drivers have no involvement in spending. But McLaren CEO Zach Brown has gone a step further, saying that Red Bull's actions constitute cheating. He said the bottom line is a team who has overspent has gained unfair advantage both in the current and following year's car development. McLaren has had a tough time in the championship this year, dropping down to 5th in the standings, and much of that has been the limitations of the new financial regulations. Brown is now trying to rally other teams against Red Bull and Aston Martin, who also broke the rules. He wrote a letter to Mercedes, Ferrari, Alpine, Alfa Romeo, Haas, and Williams, telling them that the FIA needed to act strongly. He did say that he trusted the process of the FIA, but judging by his public comments, it doesn't sound like it. Next, recovering from Japan. Adding to the mountain of problems that the FIA has to deal with is the backlash against its actions in Japan. In a race where Max Verstappen sealed the championship, drivers were furious about the safety conditions. Under torrential rain, the race got underway behind a safety car, but it took less than 2 laps for it to be red flagged. Carlos Sainz drifted off the track into the barriers, and the race director decided to pause the Grand Prix. But that wasn't what had the drivers yelling into their radios. It was when a safety tractor was sent out to collect Sainz's Ferrari while there were still cars racing around the circuit. George Russell and Sebastian Vettel also led support, asking the FIA to ban the use of cranes on track. When AlphaTauri driver Pierre Gasly drove past it, he was furious. That's because the scene was all too familiar for him. His close childhood friend, Jules Bianchi, had died in almost exactly the same conditions in Suzuka 8 years earlier when he collided with a tractor and died on impact. And he wasn't the only one angered by the decision. Sergio Perez said that it was unacceptable for such a dangerous hazard to be put on the track while there were still drivers zooming around. So what was the FIA's response? They actually went on the attack. They blamed Pierre Gasly for not slowing down enough under yellow flags. They did announce a thorough review of the incident, but we can't expect too much if the FIA is investigating themselves. Is it for a change? The FIA has only just had a major overhaul of its entire leadership. The long-standing president, Jean Todt, stood down with Ben Sulayem replacing him, and Formula One's race director was replaced by 2 in an alternating role, but some think that it could already be time for another change. Mohammed Ben Sulayem did have a rally car racing background, however, he hasn't had a history with Formula One like many of his predecessors. Jean Todt was formerly the head of Ferrari and had intimate knowledge of the industry. F1's managing director, Ross Brawn, might be a better fit. He is also a former Ferrari man who helped power Michael Schumacher to 5 back-to-back world championships with the team. And Brawn is also the mastermind behind the new regulations. He was also the one promising that the financial regulations would have serious consequences for those who didn't fall in line. But Mohammed Ben Sulayem was elected, and he does still seem to have the full confidence of drivers and team principals. Lewis Hamilton has said that he still has open communication with the president, while Toto Wolff urged his colleagues to stay calm and leave it to Mohammed Ben Sulayem. That's a lot of weight on your shoulders, Ben Sulayem. Up next, which circuit invested $1 billion for next year's Grand Prix? And why isn't David Coulthard happy with the FIA? So don't go anywhere. 3 more sprint sessions. When Mohammed Ben Sulayem took charge of the FIA last year, he was charged with a mammoth task. Not only was the sport in disarray after one of the most controversial seasons in history, but new regulations designed to make for closer racing hadn't really panned out. Max Verstappen wrapped the season up with 4 races still in hand. At the time, his lead over Charles Leclerc was more than 100 points, so the FIA's aim to reduce the gap between teams this year hasn't really panned out. That's why Ben Sulayem is changing things once again for next year. He has confirmed that 3 more sprint sessions will be added to the calendar. If you didn't catch them this season, then sprint races were held on Saturday and formed the grid lineup for Sunday's race. A fraction of the points were awarded, but the main idea was to give a shortened shootout-style race to the fans. With a wave of new fans flocking to the sport over the last few years, F1 is trying its best to keep them hooked. Ben Sulayem said, "Sprint sessions provide an exciting dynamic to the race weekend format and have proven to be popular over the past 2 seasons." And some team principals agree. Haas boss Gunther Steiner said that he would rather see more sprint sessions than an expanded calendar. Steiner thinks that it's a way of getting more out of the race weekend. Speaking of next year, the newest star on the calendar will be Las Vegas, with the Jewel in the Desert holding its first F1 Grand Prix since 1982, and the Venetian complex has some big plans for the sport's arrival. The Venetian features a hotel, casino, and entertainment center, but for next year, they will be investing a whopping $1 billion into their facilities, which they hope will be ready before the lights go out at the 2023 Las Vegas Grand Prix. And with F1 more popular in the United States than ever before, the plan is to keep the race on the calendar for long into the future. That's because the race is a little more integrated with F1 than other circuits. The Grand Prix is the only one of the year in which F1 owner Liberty Media has a direct financial stake. They even bought land for the express purpose of running the race. An executive from the company, Emily Prazer, has said that their vision extends long into the future. She said, "I don't think there's any intention to only be here for 3 years. We want to be here forever. That may sound ambitious, but we could have a new Monaco on our hands." Liberty Media have almost single-handedly revived the sport since they bought F1 out in 2016. So if they successfully tie Las Vegas into their plans, it might put European races like Monaco and Spa at risk. Europeans will have to get used to winding the clock back and waking up early. David Coulthard thinks that Liberty and FIA have an issue. While Liberty Media might be doing big things for the sport, former F1 racer David Coulthard isn't so sure. DC thinks that the company is to find a way to work better with the FIA to tighten up the sport. He was talking about the recent controversies at the Japanese Grand Prix and over the budget cap breaches, but he thinks that the issues are much bigger. Talking to Channel 4, he said that while the sport had taken a step forward with new rules, he still thinks there is a disconnect between the terms, Liberty Media and the FIA. The Japanese Grand Prix was a good example. A complicated point-scoring system and massive rain delays led to barely over half of the race being run, and as Daniel Ricciardo admitted, some of those issues might have to do with TV licensing issues. A race can't go on forever, which is why a time limit needs to be imposed, but the fans are certainly not happy with watching half a race and then not knowing the results, so DC thinks that something needs to be done. Adding more sprint races to the calendar next year could be another sticking point between the three parties. Can't they all just get along? Are you a fan of sprint races in Formula One? And do you think that there are too many races on the F1 calendar already? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again in the next one.